Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving us the opportunity. I know most of you, I think, but I'm Brent. I'm the lead pastor here. This is Amy. She's also one of the pastors here. We learned in India that I'm the big pastor and she's the small pastor.
Yeah, he was trying to translate it and explain it, and all we could hear was him using the word big and small, and I was like, he's calling me small. I love this. This is my first time in my life I've been called small. I loved that. So if you want to call me small pastor, please.
She's leaning into that term. And then this is Brother Paul, as we now know him from our time in India, Brother Paul Porter. He's been a part of Ashworth for many years, and when we sent out the call and said, who wants to go to India? Paul said, India's on my bucket list. I'd like to go. And so aren't you glad you did?
I am so glad I did, yes. And what's funny, I'll mention just real quick that when it's been on my bucket list, and it's been to go see the Taj Mahal and Mumbai and all the big sightseeing spots, and I can't imagine a better experience of India than what we had here. And it wasn't seeing the big sights.
Right.
It was seeing the real move of the Spirit.
The big sights
of God's
sights
word.
Of
God.
Yeah, exactly.
It was such as Paul said, it was such an incredible experience. I mean, to be fair, we really didn't know what we were getting into. A couple years ago, they reached out to us and said, hey, would you guys like to come and see the work that we're doing? Let me take a step back. We partnered with a group called Vishwa Vani. You've heard us talk about this before. That partnership came about because of Suki, who was an elder at one time, but now is a part of our first service. We knew that we wanted to invest in India. We knew that we wanted to partner with the places that God has brought to Ashworth. And for my 18 years here at Ashworth, we've always had an Indian family or 5 as a part of our congregation. And so years ago, we made it a priority to say, how do we invest in the nations that are a part of Ashworth? And India was one of them. And so Suki brought to us and said, there's this organization called Vishwa Vani, and I think they could be a good partner. They've been around a while. They've got a great ministry. They're doing good work. They're spreading the gospel. And so honestly, because of Suki's recommendation, I know Suki, I trust her, and the elders said, sure, let's do it. And so for the last couple of years, we've had a partnership with them. They said, why don't you guys come? And I'll admit, when they told me the agenda for this meeting last year, I'm like, yeah, I don't think so. We left on a Saturday this year, and we came back on a Sunday. So you're talking about 8 days total, start to finish, and 24 hours on each end of that, at minimum 24 hours, is travel. So your time on the ground is very tight, and it is 11 and a half hours ahead of us. And so you can imagine, I'm thinking jet lag. I'm being very selfish, and I'm like, no. So I put them off last year, and I said, no, we're not going to worry about it. But then when we sponsored the church earlier this year in the spring, they came back and they said, we'd love to host you. If you guys want to put together a group to come and kind of see the work. And even though the jet lag idea was still in my mind and I thought this is going to be miserable, I talked to Jude and Nancy and we talked to Prim and Suki and we said, all right, are we going to hate our lives as much as we think? And they said, yes. This is not going to be an easy trip. However, you need to go. It will be a great experience and you need to make time for this. So we sent out the call. Paul said yes. Amy said, I want to go. And so we started putting the whole trip together. And that was basically it. They told us, get your airfare to get here. And tell us when you're coming. And we'll take care of the rest. I don't know about you, Paul. I've never been a part of that kind of a trip before. No. And really, I didn't know. I knew the name of the guy we were meeting, but I didn't know. Were they going to have a sign in the airport with our name on it? They didn't. They just saw 3 lost-looking white people walking out of the airport and said, "You come here, come with
Amy
us."
And Paul.
And
and then we were like, "We're just going with these random guys. Like, what if this is a scam?"
2 of us had just listened to the podcast Scam Factory, and we thought, "This is it. They're carting us away. We will never be back.
We will never be seen again." But nothing could have prepared us for the trip in a lot of ways. Nothing could have prepared us for who they were and their reception of us but also the move of God that we were able to see and experience. And so we want to share a lot of this experience with you today in the next 35 minutes, as much as we can. For those who are hungry for a little bit more, we are hosting a coffee event at Dave and Lori Ringenberg's house in Urbandale on Wednesday. The address will be in the newsletter on Wednesday, so make sure you pay attention to that. But we learned a lot while we were there. And one of our favorite things we learned was hallelujah, right? So Amy, teach us.
Oh, we love this. You know I love an interactive thing. So every service we were at, even if it was just a group of believers gathered to talk about something, somebody would say something great or like offer a prayer or something, and then the person leading it would say, hallelujah, and everybody would throw their arms up like this, try it, and they would say, hallelujah. So let's practice it. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
There we go.
We're going to work that in
We're
next
going to work
Sunday.
this in
Yeah,
every Sunday, just FYI.
We learned about plants while we were there, and I forgot to put this in the pictures, but anybody heard of touch-me-nots before? I'd never experienced them. Touch-me-nots are a small little flower plant on the ground, and they have like little leaves that come off, very small, but when you touch them, it closes up. I mean, you just start, I was impressed by that.
And I said, there's a plant that represents Brent Clark. You touch him and he like closes up, you know. We did get to have there was all kinds of, it was just tropical. So there's all kinds of beautiful plants everywhere. Fruit, we ate fruit that we'd never had. Guava, papaya, dragon fruit, all the.
Fresh.
Yes.
Very
amazing.
Fresh. We met a traffic cop in one village, and he had a name tag on, and no lie, this was his name. His first name, Bill Clinton. Last name, Jenna.
Bill Clinton.
Don't know why. We wanted to take a picture of it, but he was in uniform, so he wouldn't let us. But that's Bill Clinton, Jenna. And that's not two names, that was one name. It was fascinating. We had lots of laughs on the trip. As you can, Amy and I have a good time basically everywhere we go. We weren't sure about Paul. In fact, we had conversations about Paul going in, like, what kind of traveler is Paul? Is Paul going to be good? Paul's a great guy to travel with.
And we're still friends. He still wants to be friends with us.
He still wants to
after
attend Ashworth after this trip. Amy and I consider that success. But we laughed a lot, and our host was open to laughter as well. He, in fact, said several times, you guys are a lot of fun, which we took as a compliment. But there were several things that kind of made us laugh along the way, including one of the things he loved about us, let me say this, is that we always said yes. Whatever we wanted, whatever he said, hey, would you guys like to do this? Yes. Would you guys like to try this food? Yes. Didn't matter. We were just whatever. Yeah. You want to tell the story, Paul?
So we were we're heading to Vizag, and so he's looking for stuff for us to do there. He wants us to take us somewhere we have some free time. And so for some reason, he directs the question to me. He says, hey, Paul, do you want to see a Russian submarine that was donated to the Indian Navy for World War II? And so I just said, sure, thinking that this was just one of a few different options that we might get. And then maybe we'd pick something a little bit more Indian cultural. But he took that yes as, this is what we're doing. This became his prime directive to get us to that submarine.
Not only that, because he took it that Paul really wants to see a submarine.
That I'm into submarines.
He's into submarines.
I'm not.
And so multiple times before we get here, he's like, even if we're running late, don't worry, Paul. We're going to get to that submarine. And you see this picture here where the three of us were in front of the submarine. Amy and I are just dying the whole time laughing at the way this has turned out. In fact, in one of these pictures that we had, we were even like, no, just get one of Paul and the submarine, because we thought that would, be exactly what he wanted.
It was so hot inside that metal tube. We were ready to get out.
It was so hot inside.
And then
that
Amy, what's outside of the picture over to the left that we can't see?
This is the crazy part. I'm like, we're from Iowa. I love your submarine, but we want to see the ocean. I mean, this is the Bay of Bengal. So we flew into Hyderabad, which is all landlocked. It's a big city, like a tech hub, big city. And then we took a plane and went to this little, smaller town, not little, but still big. Everywhere in India is big. But Vizag, and it's right on the coast. I mean, it is a coastal city, and it is hot and tropical. So right on the other side of that submarine is just this glorious, beautiful view of the ocean, but we were in this little submarine because of Paul. So had a great time.
All because of Paul. That is correct. Paul is a good sport, by the way, and we do have to say that. Paul was involved in a lot of the things that made us laugh. In fact, Paul, why don't you explain this picture here?
Oh, so yeah, I mean, you're out driving anywhere in India, there's always herds of goats, sheep, cows, all over the place.
Yeah, everything.
And we really did want to get a picture, but I got out of the taxi to get a picture of the goats, and Augustine, who was taking us around, he went to the shepherd and grabbed the umbrella that the shepherd was carrying and gave it to me. And so they got this picture, and it's kind of silly, but you can actually own this picture if you want. It's on a bookmark. Are they out front?
I don't have, they're in my office. I'll grab them after the service.
You can have this picture if you want it.
Yes. So, and I just have to share one more story about Paul. And this isn't just Paul, it's all of us. It was Indian food for an entire week, okay? And I'll admit, going into it, I was like, how am I going to do? I've had Indian food, I like it, but I haven't had it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, And so for all of us, there was at least one brief moment of, let's say, intense intestinal strife going on. And there was, the bathroom situation was, you didn't know if you were going to be in a place that had toilet paper or would allow you to flush toilet paper, or would even have a trash can to throw something in, because we all took like wet wipes and those kind of things. We were prepared. Well, one day towards the end of the trip, we've seen Paul move a little bit, and Paul comes out, and his backpack was in the taxi outside, and he looks at our host, Augustine, and says, "Can somebody get my bag?" Immediately, Amy and I know what's going on. We've been there. We've experienced this. It's fine. No big deal, right? Augustine decides to look at Paul and say, "Bag? Why do you need your bag?" In front of a group of people. And so Paul just kind of stammers a little bit, and then Amy comes to the rescue and says,
I was like, get him his bag. The man needs
"What are
his
you
bag.
asking for? Quit asking him questions like that."
And you can't, like Brent said, you can't flush paper there. And as the case for lots of underdeveloped countries, the plumbing just can't handle it. And so Brent and I know, you came prepared, I think, with lots of Kleenex and stuff, but anywhere time we went to dinner or something, or the napkins on the table, I was putting napkins in my pockets. I was putting,
just in case,
paper towels and Kleenexes. Anytime I found them, I was tucking them away in some pocket. And then when I got home and did my laundry, I must not have checked every pocket because it was all over inside my washer and dryer.
Yes. One of the things we got to experience there was the traffic. Keith, would you try to hit slide number 6? It didn't work in the first service. We'll try it again. Nope, it's not working. Don't know why. I had a video of traffic. I'll post it somewhere where you can see it. It is as chaotic as you can imagine. In fact, just don't look. There are lane markers most of the time. They don't matter. They just don't matter. And it is a confluence of every car and tuk-tuk and motorbike that you can imagine. And it is amazing because it's not, if I was driving, I would constantly be doing this. No, it's not that. They just go. And it is amazing how they're in sync. It's like there's not many accidents. At least we weren't in any accidents. And it was an amazing experience. Most of the time, though, you may just want to close your eyes because that's how goofy and crazy it was. Here's one of our favorite pictures, I think, for all of us, don't you think?
Yeah. I love this. We would do this every morning when we stayed at Vishwa Vani, one of their headquarters, for a few nighs. This is the roof of our building, and it was just, again, it's tropical. I mean, we were watching like parrots fly by in the morning. It was just beautiful. And
mountains in front of us.
Yes, and mountains. And first of all, we would wake up at 5 a.m. because there were guys that were staying at the center who were there like training to like become pastors in their villages, and they were praying and worshiping at 5 a.m. And
right
it's
outside our rooms.
Hard to be annoyed by that. I'm like, well, I should probably get up and pray and worship too. So we got up early. They would make us tea, and we would sit up there, and our friend Augustine, who hosted us, would come. And we just had reflection and like laughs and tender moments, lots of moments of their reflecting. And it was this is a perfect picture of some of what the trip offered, which was a moment to like be relational and to slow down and not be so task driven. And we experienced that a lot in this culture. And so just having that in the mornings was so fun. We drank a lot of tea there. Yeah. And then we ate a lot. That was a real highlight for me. I don't know, did you gain weight? Brent and I both gained weight. Oh, yeah. Yep. So wasn't expecting that, thought I might.
Even when we weren't hungry, they would say, oh, it's time to eat again. And we'd just be like, and we didn't want to turn them down because they were just so generous and so gracious.
And never clear your plate. Because if you clear your plate, they will bring more food.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm saying I wasn't hungry, but I enjoyed everything I ate. I said yes to everything. So even here, we're eating like a little street food. It's like this like little puff ball, and you put like chickpeas and sauce and limes and
pori or something like that.
Yeah, pori.
Something that's close. I can't remember.
Pani so good. God is real, and sometimes you just experience it through tiny foods from other cultures. The food in South India was like so good, and we fellowshipped a lot around that.
Yes, we did. We got to see a lot of different sites. This is the Charminar in Hyderabad. Going to this place, they had a street bazaar, a market out there, and there were thousands of people. And I have videos of us trying to weave through the people. And I heard on one of the videos, one of us is saying, "Can you see him?" Augustine's way up ahead. And we're like, "Yeah, I still see him," trying not to get lost among this sea of people. We did get to ride the tuk-tuk, which was fun and amazing. It was a short trip, but again, Augustine, our host, just wanted to make sure we had the full Indian experience. Mm-hmm. And probably Amy's favorite thing was just this right here. She was treated like royalty. We actually all were, but we put her in this chair and Paul's fanning her and that wasn't the only time she was fanned. I saw another picture of Amy being fanned. So all that to say, we had an incredible trip. It was like drinking from a fire hose all week as we learned about the ministry of Vishwa Vani. We experienced this incredible culture, and we just got to hear about the incredible movement of God through this ministry. It was truly, truly amazing. You've kind of heard now how we got involved with Vishwa Vani, but we really, to be fair, we didn't know what we were getting into, and we really didn't know fully about the ministry. Suki said, this is a great organization, and our elders just said, "Sounds good, we trust you, Suki." And being there, we were able to really hear more about who they are and their unwavering passion and commitment to reaching the villages of the nation of India. And we say villages, and that's important because they're not looking to plant churches in the big cities of Vizag and Hyderabad and Chennai. They're looking for the villages that have 50, 100, 200 people. Smaller villages is where they're going to plant these churches and win people and lead people to know and follow Jesus. You can't read it probably very well, but the blue thing across the screen is their theme verse. That is what they use as a ministry. And it says this, it's Romans 15:20. "It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundation." And that's what we really got to see.
Yeah, we call this frontier missions. And I've had lots of opportunities to do mission work around the world. And usually when I go somewhere, I am greeted by a missionary who is showing me, here's the work that we are already doing here, and here's how you can plug into that. And you can just join them in their ministry. Vishwa Vani is not doing that. When they go to a village, there's not someone there greeting them. They are the first Christian on the scene in that village. And that's what we call frontier missions. And they're doing this all over the country. And I have so much respect for that because that is the hardest work that you can do as a missionary.
And I was amazed. I think one of the things that struck me the most that was so cool was seeing this organization, Vishwa Vani, is totally indigenously led. So they're not like, they weren't inviting us like, "Hey guys, come on staff with Vishwa Vani and plant churches in India." No, that doesn't make any sense. You plant churches and you in your villages where you live and you serve and you're, you have influence. And so that's actually pretty rare to have a missions organization that is totally indigenous. And even with the funding, the way they fund their operation is not like, well, we're going to America for all of our funding and then bringing it all home. No, these folks are like consistently, their base support that's paying the salaries of their pastors and their main ministry people on the ground is all through Indians giving. Now they do partner with churches around the world when they're planting churches and that kind of thing. But even that, they're very thoughtful and careful about, they want to be sustainable as an Indian ministry, reaching Indian people with Indian funds. And that's beautiful because it doesn't become this weird kind of like, oh, suddenly everything's looking American, or you know what I mean? And so there's something really genuine and beautiful happening.
Yeah. In fact, Augustine told us a story where a friend of his from the States called him and said, hey, I've got this big check. I want to send it to you. And his response was, well, let's just pray about that. Let's just pray and see what God wants to do with that money. It wasn't send it. Brent would be, our address is 5300 Ashworth Road. You can drop that in the mail. No, I mean, I think it is significant. We were all shocked and encouraged by the fact that I think it was a $14 million budget that they have is all indigenously raised. And they give people these small offering boxes to put in their houses, and they can save, and then occasionally the missionaries go around and will collect it to fund the ministry. And it's just really, really incredible. One of the ways we can partner, though, is by helping construct church buildings in certain areas so that once they have a group of believers, people who are following Jesus, they want to construct a building for them that they can worship in. And let's just say, when we were going between areas, the number of churches that they have planted is amazing. Yeah. I mean, we are just driving down the road and he'd be like, oh, there's another one of our churches and there's another one of our churches.
I was making a joke that I'm not sure that the Indians in our car really got, but I was like, it's like Starbucks in the U.S. There's a Vishwa Vani church on every corner. Yes. No, but not every corner, but like every village we would be driving. And there it is, there's another one. I mean,
and you've heard us talk about this before, is that they use kind of a hub approach to planting these churches. They'll identify 5 villages that are kind of close in proximity, and then the goal is to plant a church in the middle of those 5 villages. And so these 5 villages will then come to this place to worship, and that's what we were a part of. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to see this is a booklet that they gave each of us, which talks about their mission and vision. And in there you can see that they have reached like 10 or 11,000 villages so far, with the goal of reaching 100,000 by 2030. They have churches established, groups of people, not necessarily buildings, but churches in about a little over 3,000 of those villages, and then they have church buildings in a little over 1,000 of those villages.
Yeah. This organization knows what they're doing, and they're very committed to this vision. We were all impressed with the level of organization, the meticulousness, the commitment. They were training pastors where we were staying, and these pastors commit to 3 months, 5 days a week, where they leave their families. They come from the villages or the towns that they're a part of for training 5 days a week for 3 months. They're able to go home on the weekends. But I mean, that's the level of commitment. People that start following Jesus, they won't even baptize until they know that they've been following Jesus for 6 months. They just want to make sure that faith is genuine and real. Were you going to say something? Go ahead.
I was just going to say also the other thing that we really resonated with was seeing that Vishwa Vani doesn't just build a church and plant a church building. They're like building community within the villages and caring for people's needs. And so many of the churches, if you look right next to it, they've also built a building that's a community center, or they've built a learning center, or for kids, or they had places where they were showing us, it was all these sewing machines set up, and they're teaching the folks in the villages like how to sew, giving them a skill that they can use. And they have medical clinics. There's a number of medical clinics. Mm-hmm. And so one of the stories, we heard so many stories from people who were ministry leaders in Vishwa Vani or pastors who became Christians, got to see God working in their village. And one of the things that they told us was, I remember a pastor telling me this. He said, when Vishwa Vani came and we met Jesus, like in our village, I met Jesus and other people started meeting Jesus, our village started to flourish. And they talked about people were like getting healthy. People are starting to learn how to read. And it was just this reminder of the gospel is not just plant churches and talk to everybody about Jesus, but it's like live out the gospel, which is the flourishing of all people. And how do we help people be healthy and whole and healed as they're following Jesus? And Vishwa Vani is doing that.
Yeah, and that resonated with us because we feel like that's something that's a core value for us as Ashworth as well. It's why we partner with the Learning Center. It's why we have some new initiatives that we're going to be talking about in the coming months that we're really excited about, because we do believe in a more holistic idea and understanding of the gospel. The spiritual aspect is very important, and we would never downplay that. But I think one of the negatives of evangelism and missions years ago was that we only focused on the spiritual and just thought, oh, the rest of it doesn't matter. But now we see there's a real push that says it's the spiritual and the physical and the mental and the emotional. All these things work together in order to help people really experience shalom, the wholeness, the fullness of God in their lives. And so that was an exciting thing. And, with the spiritual side of things, though, we were able to see and experience.
I'm so sorry. You guys, sit down. Just sit down.
I knew it was bothering you more than us, and I could just I could feel it coming from you. But focused on the spiritual side of things, we discovered that when we were there, people constantly said, would you pray for us? Would you pray for us? And with that, there's a real expectation of when they pray, they expect God to move. And if we heard one, we heard 200 stories of just the miraculous working of God in people's lives. They just believe. They have nothing else. There's nothing. They don't have comfortable church buildings to go to. Many of them probably can't read. We got to tour some of the housing, if you can call it that. I mean, that was just block walls, maybe 2 rooms with a room out back with a hole in the ground that was the bathroom. They may have had electricity, but as we experienced, it wasn't consistent. And so when they go into these villages, they're looking for a person of peace, somebody that'll be open and receptive to the gospel. And then if they are, then they share Christ with them. And what they found is that they take nothing but Jesus Christ and Him crucified and the power of the Holy Spirit, just like Paul talked about in the New Testament. And with that, they are seeing real lives changed. I remember they were talking about the story of a man who was immobile. He couldn't move for like 10 to 15 days. He would not eat. He couldn't drink. And they tried every religious solution to heal him. They called in the Hindu priests. Of course, the Hindus have millions of gods, and they were calling out and praying to the millions of Hindu gods as they could, and nothing was helping. And a family member said, you know what, let's call the Christian pastor. And there was a lot of hesitation in the family. No, we don't want to do that. But finally, because nothing was working for this guy, they relented, and the pastor came and prayed for him, and that guy was healed. I mean, for the first time in, 10 or 15 days, he was able to talk, he was able to eat, he was able to move. And because of that, he came to faith in Jesus Christ. And not just him, his family and others in the village. And that's just one of many stories that we experienced.
It was interesting too. They had talked about, they were sharing that they don't go into a village, or when they begin to share about Jesus with people, they don't go in being like, now you need to set all your other gods aside and what you're doing is bad and wrong and all these things. Instead, they just go in and just talk about Jesus. Like, oh, there's the God we serve, his name's Jesus. And
he's incomparable.
And he's incomparable.
That's what they
were
said.
saying, and so many of the stories that we heard was Jesus was just different. There's all these gods in Hinduism, and then they would meet Jesus, and they're like, there's nothing that compares to him. He's different than all the other gods. And so then people are drawn to him and fall in love with him and give their lives to him. And we were talking about how even there was a pastor that we met. He was one of the pastors at Ananagar. Awesome guy. And he tells this story, and he talked about how he's like, I was anti-Christian. Like, I was like, no. And he said Christianity was for the lowest caste in India. That's how I saw it.
That's how the missionaries originally came in to present Jesus to the people with nothing. So if you weren't of that caste.
And so he's talking about it's a caste for the lowest religion, whatever. And then ended up, he met Jesus, fell in love with him, and now he's a pastor of one of the church we helped plant. And he shares this story, and then our friend Augustine afterwards was telling me, he's like, you know why one of the reasons India doesn't want Christianity to come, they don't want to allow Christianity, is because he's like, it messes with the caste system. And he talked about how even in places where people are coming to know Jesus, that becomes the incomparable Jesus. Like Jesus is it. And when Jesus is it, the caste system no longer exists, because Jesus invites all people from every place, and there's a level ground when we follow Jesus. And so suddenly there's not room for this hierarchical structure. And that becomes a real issue when a whole culture is based on a system that way. Isn't that wild? I was struck by how really following Jesus can change everything. I mean, whole systems of the way we live.
I think one of the stories that really touched me was of Samuel, who was an infant, and when he was born, his mother died, and so she was going to be cremated, and the father blamed the son for what happened to the mother, and so was going to have the infant son cremated with the mother. And I looked this up today or last week to see if this was in any way some kind of a tradition in India or in Hinduism, and it is not. This was something that happened in this one village. It is horrific, but a nearby Vishwa Vani congregation heard about this, came to the village and pleaded with them for Samuel, that infant son, and the village relented and gave Samuel to the church, and they raised him. And then later on, we're just out at the training center working with some of the children, and there in the corner is this young man, probably 17, 18 years old, and Augustine says, hey, this, by the way, is Samuel from that story I told you about. And all of a sudden, it became so real. This wasn't just some story about someone somewhere that happened. This was a real person who was saved by the power of Jesus Christ working through the church. And even just this morning, I was reminded of the Old Testament Samuel and how he had a mom and dad, but he was raised in the temple by Eli. And he became such a pivotal character in redemptive history. And so I think that Samuel's story is not finished yet. We're going to see great things from him.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've already heard enough, right? I mean, we could go on and on with stories, and they shared with us, like in September through Vishwa Vani, there were 687 baptisms. Isn't that incredible? I mean, this is an organization that is incredibly committed to the message and the gospel of Jesus, and however they can present it. And it was quite amazing. For us, the gospel came to us even, I think we would say, and it was through their incredible and generous hospitality. I think all of us felt a tinge of conviction. A tinge. You like that? A tinge. Whether it was meeting us at the airport at 3 a.m. in the morning their time. Now, our flight landed at 1:30, and it took us a little bit to get through customs. Some people up here got questioned more than others. Some of us just got to breeze right through with no questions. It was great. But didn't matter what time we arrived. They were there outside the airport. And look at that. Augustine's the one on the right with the big smile. Met us with flowers, just waiting outside the airport for us to get there. Always saying, what can we do for you? How can we help you? I mean, as I said, from the beginning, they just said, get your tickets here, fly here, and we'll take care of the rest. We had no idea what that meant. But when they said they would take care of the rest, they took care of everything, from our hotels, from our flights. We flew from Hyderabad to Vizag. They took care of that. One night, they wanted to show us something in Hyderabad. This is a fortress called Golconda, and they do a light and laser show on the fortress. And this is just an example of how they treated us. We get there a little bit late. Traffic was bad, if you can imagine. And when we get there, they have one showing left, and it is in Telugu or Hindi. And for us, we were all just like, we'll go watch it. We don't have to understand it. It's fine. It's no big deal. Well, Augustine goes to the guy that's putting this on. We don't know how. We're standing off to the side. The next thing we know is he comes back and he says, they're going to do an extra show for us, an English show at 8 o'clock. So,
I mean, this massive yard full of people now became, for us, 4 chairs.
4 chairs.
4 chairs to
they
watch
took
this
all the
whole
other
show.
chairs out.
Yeah.
There's 4 chairs for us to sit in. They ran the English show. The guy that's in charge of this stuck around, and his helper, and they're just talking to us about the history of this place, what happened here, like so generous with their time. And, you know, they prioritized us, people over task. You know, we kidded, I think, but it really wasn't kidding. In America, if it closes at 9 and you're there at 8:59, you're walking into a locked door.
Yeah.
These people were just like, no, stay as long as you need to. And I mean, it was kind of like, no, you guys can go home now, we'll leave. But they really did show a value for people, which was really incredible. Let me see if I can get this video to work. Keith, hit number 25. I hope it's not too loud. This is the scene when we got to Anand Nagar, which was the church building that we helped build earlier this year. We were there to dedicate this building, and we drive up, and these people are there waiting on us with the instruments, with the flowers, throwing them at us. I mean, you know, dancing, celebrating.
There's the pastors right there, the ones that read.
Yes. Keith, go to the next one. Go to 26. We'll see if it works. This is at a different location. I think this is at Suri, right?
Suri
Nanagram. And again, no church dedication, but they knew we were coming. They greeted us at the road, and we celebrate all the way down to the place. Go ahead and see if you can hit 27, see if it'll work. It may not. Some of these didn't load in correctly. I'm not sure why. Try 28. It may not work either. We'll post these other places. But you get kind of the idea of what happened. We were special guests for them. They wanted to treat us very well. And so we were able to dedicate this church at Anand Nagar. They allowed us to cut the ribbon. Paul, I think, prayed the blessing over it. Amy, what was it you did?
You opened the door.
You opened the door. You cried. Amy just cried. Amy opened the door. We cut the ribbon. I mean, it was amazing. We were not a burden to them. And let me get to this next one here.
This is the thing that, like, I mean, everything. I love the food. I love learning about Jesus and his different culture. I mean, everything was honestly amazing. But the hospitality shook me. Like,
there you go.
Oh, there we are. This is one of the services we showed up to, and they had fresh coconut. Guys, have you ever had fresh coconut? They just cut the top open, stick a straw in there. It is coconut water. Okay, you drink that. Then during the service, they take the coconuts, slice them open, and brought us back we're eating fresh coconut from, these, so we got to step up our Sunday morning game here.
We do.
And washing our feet. I mean, if you can't see my face, that's good.
I took that picture out.
Thank you. Bawling the whole time. But the level of just love that they had for us was Paul talked about it. He's like, made us all uncomfortable. It sure did. It was like, this feels wrong. Like, I haven't done anything to deserve this. What do I do for you? And I realized, even one time Brent looked at me and he's like, stop being so American. Because one of the things that, in particular, I think white American culture can be very transactional, where we're like, if somebody does something for you, what do you feel like you have to do?
I owe them.
I got to do something for them. And we spend our whole lives doing that, don't we? Like, they got me a gift, I should get them a gift. There's all these things that we do. And this culture is not transactional. This culture is, you are here, you are our guests, and it is our joy to love you and serve you, and we want you to know. And that did something. I mean, the feelings I had were like, it was just revealing God's love at a new level. Like, that's how God sees me. I need to stop being so transactional and how, he does this and I owe him this. And no, these folks were like, oh no, it's our joy. We love you. We're delighted in you. And we're so happy you're here. And that was, and I thought, wow, how interesting. I did ask our host, because he's hosting us so generously the
He's
whole
a director
time.
of the organization.
Yeah, and
so-
spent 8 days with us.
Yes.
I mean, he's got a lot going on. He would stay up, one of his colleagues told me that he just stays up and worked after we would go to bed, so that he could get his stuff done. So he spent all this time with us. And I remember asking him, what's it like for you when you come to the U.S. and people host you? And he just kind of laughed, and he's like, I love Americans. And he didn't want to say any. He's so kind and gracious. He's like, I love America. I love Americans. But the more I dug, the more I was like, oh yeah, I know how it goes. Nobody even greets you at the airport, let alone with flowers and tea. People send you an Uber to take you to your hotel where you stay without your friends, and you stay in a hotel, and then you go to your event where you're speaking, and then you go back to your hotel. Like, there's a way that, and he just was like, Americans are busy. They're too busy to have hospitality, and that there was that shift. Even in this last week, I've been asking that question daily, like, am I too busy for people? Where can I be interruptible? God, show me where I should go out of my way, and I get to go out of my way on someone's behalf or receive that, but not this like, I don't have time for hospitality. My schedule, No, there is something that we experience of God's heart in hospitality as we receive it and as we give it. And when we're in a culture that's so task-oriented, we miss that.
Yeah, and I see our time's running short here, guys. We have way too much to say. We've talked about the ministry of Vishwa Vani, and they're seeing real change happen in people's lives. They are, the church we planted at, let me get a picture up here for you, Sorry, whatever that one is. That's the first church we helped construct last year. You see it's got a community center next to it. That's where they're teaching women how to sew different things. What was I going to say about this one? Oh, this village is now 100% Christian.
That's right.
That's what it was. Yeah, this village is now 100% Christian because of the work of Vishwa Vani, and God is using them in incredible ways. And Paul, you were talking first service about Matthew 28 and Revelation. And
Right. So their strategy is to reach people groups. So they have a focus on, I think, 300 different people groups there in India. And when we look at our Great Commission in Matthew 28:19, Jesus says, "Go therefore into all the world and make disciples of all nations." And and that word for nations is actually ethne, which is better translated as people group. According to the United Nations, there's about 200 nations in the world, but by some estimates, there's between like 12 and 17,000 people groups, which are linguistic, cultural people groups. And so that's what Vishwa Vani is focused on, is reaching out into all of those people groups. And there's the passage in Revelation 7:9 that says, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands." This is what we expect to see at the end. People from every people, nation, tribe, and language. That can only happen if we reach every single people group. And that's what Vishwa Vani is trying to do, and other mission organizations around the world. And I'm so impressed by that.
You saw him earlier. This is our guide. This was Augustine. This encapsulates him as a host. so joyful, so gracious, so amazing. Amy asked him at one point, "What's your favorite thing about your job?" And he said, "Praying for my country." And I thought, well, that's a great thing to be about. I asked him, it's not a Christian nation. And I said, well, tell me about persecution. Tell me about opposition. And he looked at me and he said, we do see some opposition. He says, but I see about 10% opposition. I see 90% opportunity. And I just think that's an incredible way to think about it. He shared the story of a woman who came to faith, and she started hosting people in her home, and they would worship in her home. And we say home and think much more rustic than we have. And they outgrew the small room that she had. So just like we would have tea on the terrace, a lot of houses have stairs that go up to the top and have a terrace up top. And they began to worship on the terrace, on her rooftop terrace. And that drew some attention, and all of them were arrested because of that. They were arrested. They were in jail for 3 or 4 days, not given food. They didn't care that they didn't have food. Didn't matter. You're Christians. We don't care. And these women thought it was a privilege to be arrested for Jesus. And they were arrested for violating what are known as the anti-conversion laws that are real and do exist in that nation. So Augustine was amazing. We had such an incredible trip. We have over 1,000 photos. I just put like 40 in here. We arrived at our place we were staying for a few days. We arrived late, and these were all the pastors in training. And as soon as we pull in, they start clapping and singing. And I tell you, it was quite a reception that we received. I'm looking here to see if there's any other pictures to show. Oh, here's the church at Surrey. That's the one we helped construct a year ago. And inside that church, you can see a plaque that actually talks about Ashworth Church. And they are very grateful for us and what we've been able to do, which, if you ask me, was very little. Money's the easy part. They've got the hard part of what they're doing. Any last thoughts, words from either of you? I'm surprised we got Amy back. Amy loved it. Not that we didn't, but we basically had to drag her out of there. Most places we went, people loved to visit with us. When we were at the church dedication, we were told that we might be the first white people that some of them had ever seen. All they wanted, I don't know if you saw this photo, was us to pray with them. So after we dedicated the building, just floods of people came up, and all 3 of us just prayed for people over and over. There was a language barrier, but it didn't matter. The Spirit was praying in and through us, and it was incredible. A few more pictures here. This was, I think, the prayer time, just a different angle of it. Amy was quite popular, as you guys can imagine. They loved her, and they loved having photos taken, and so it was an incredible trip. We are going to have a get-together on Wednesday night, and that will be a time for Q&A as well, if you have questions. We were hoping we'd have time today, but we just had too much to say. And so, but we know you may have questions. As I said, it'll be at the Ringenberg's home in Urbandale, and watch the newsletter. The address will be in there Wednesday, so we'll make sure we get that out for you guys to know. But it'll be at 6:30 p.m. at their house. And so what we want to do now to close is just to honor our friends in India and spend some time praying for their nation. Amy, do you want to lead us in that?